All right, so let's jump right into this. We're going to be taking a deep dive into the world of Benjamin Bugsy Siegel and the Flamingo Hotel. It's funny, you send over this really fascinating mix of sources for this one. We've got historical articles, some biographical excerpts, even a book review, and it seems like everyone's got an opinion about Bugsy and his dream for Vegas. So I guess our mission today is to kind of
Yeah.
uncover the real story. Was he a visionary who really did shape Las Vegas, or was he just a reckless gangster who got caught up in a whirlwind of his own making?
I think what really grabs people about Bugsy's story is that it's not just about gambling and the glitz and the glamour. It's really about the transformation of Las Vegas itself. He shows up in the 1940s, and Vegas is still this dusty desert town. And he has this vision for something completely different, this luxurious oasis that draws people in with,
Promise of escape and excitement. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild to think that this all started in the slums of Williamsburg, Brooklyn. I mean, his story is, it's just this incredible journey from being an impoverished immigrant kid to a notorious mobster. And then, you know, he's rubbing elbows with all of Hollywood's elite.
It is a pretty stark contrast.
Mhm.
And I think that's a big part of what makes Bugsy so interesting. He was born into poverty. His parents were Jewish immigrants from Russia.
Mm-hmm.
But even from a young age, it seems like he just had this drive to escape his circumstances, even if that meant turning to crime. He was involved in bootlegging as a teenager, strong-arming people. There were even allegations of him being involved in some hits.
Oh, wow. And this is all before he even meets Meyer Lansky, right? They formed their partnership pretty early on.
Yeah, they were both young and ambitious. But I think Bugsy had this charisma that Lansky maybe didn't have as much of.
Yeah, he was. From everything I've read, he was really stylish, charming, almost magnetic.
He definitely understood the importance of image. He loved the finer things in life, custom-tailored suits, fancy nightclubs. He got it. This wasn't just some thug. This was a guy who wanted to be seen as this sophisticated businessman, someone who belonged in the upper echelons of society.
Well, and it's funny because you have this guy who wants to be perceived as sophisticated, and yet he absolutely hated the nickname Bugsy, which is pretty ironic because it came from his crazy temper. I mean, most gangsters would love a nickname like that.
Right. Almost like a badge of honor.
Yeah.
But Bugsy hated it. I think it speaks volumes about who he was. Here's this guy living a life of crime, and yet he still craves respectability. He wants to be more than just a bug, just a nuisance that people can swat away.
Yeah.
I think that internal conflict, that desire to transcend his background, it really drove a lot of his choices.
So in 1936, he relocates to Los Angeles. I mean, was he just looking for new opportunities, or was he maybe trying to, leave his past behind and actually go legit?
I think for Bugsy, it was about expanding his horizons. Los Angeles was booming, especially the film industry. But it also had this undercurrent of organized crime. So it was this perfect blend of opportunity and allure. And Bugsy, he just thrived in that environment.
It's kind of wild to imagine him going from the streets of New York to, the glamour of Hollywood. I mean, he was hanging out with Cary Grant, Clark Gable, even Frank Sinatra. And get this, actress Jean Harlow was the godmother to his daughter.
Yeah, he fit right in. He loved the glamour, the power, the connections. It allowed him to project this image of success and legitimacy, even as he was, still running his criminal enterprises behind the scenes.
So while he's out there mingling with movie stars, he's still running numbers rackets and prostitution rings and the drug trade.
Pretty much. That duality is really, it's at the heart of Bugsy's story.
Yeah.
He's always trying to straddle these two worlds, the legitimate businessman and the ruthless gangster.
Yeah.
And that tension, that contradiction, it ultimately leads to his downfall.
We can't talk about Bugsy without talking about Virginia Hill, his girlfriend. What a fascinating character. A runaway from Alabama who ends up working for Al Capone. And then she becomes Bugsy's flamingo. I mean, there's a whole other deep dive right there.
Their relationship was intense, passionate.
Volatile.
Oh, yeah, definitely volatile. And full of drama. I mean, they were both ambitious, captivating, but their whole world was built on secrets and danger.
And then there's her testimony before the KIFO committee,
Yeah.
Senate committee that was investigating organized crime. Was she trying to distance herself from Bugsy and the mob, or was there something else going on there? And then her death in Europe ruled a suicide. It all just seems so mysterious.
She knew too much. Virginia Hill was both a participant in that world and a victim of it. It's a tragic story with a lot of unanswered questions.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about the Flamingo. It's the 1940s. Las Vegas is still this tiny little blip on the map, just a dusty desert town with a few casinos catering to a very specific clientele. And then Bugsy comes along with this grand vision.
He saw the potential of Las Vegas, before almost anyone else. He understood the people, wanted to escape. They wanted a place where they could indulge their fantasies. And forget about the everyday world. He wanted to build a luxurious casino resort, unlike anything Las Vegas had ever seen.
So he wasn't just thinking about gambling, he wanted to create an experience.
Exactly. It was about the glamour, the opulence, the excitement of rubbing shoulders with the rich and famous. He poured everything into the Flamingo. Money, time, energy. He was obsessed with every single detail, determined to make it the most glamorous destination in the world.
And that single-minded pursuit is what ultimately sets the stage for both his triumph and his downfall.
But the construction process itself was...
It was a mess, right? I mean, there were delays, material shortages, costs were spiraling out of control.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a nightmare. And Bugsy's perfectionism and his lavish spending habits, they didn't exactly help. There are stories about him tearing down entire sections of the hotel because they didn't meet his specifications. Plus, this was right after World War II. Materials were scarce. The construction industry was still trying to recover.
So it sounds like a perfect storm of, Bugsy's extravagance, the post-war shortages, and maybe even a little bit of bad luck. But despite all of that, he perseveres.
He really believed in his vision. He thought the Flamingo would be his masterpiece, his ticket to legitimacy and lasting success. But the reality is, he was operating in a world where dreams often clash with, harsh reality.
And that clash is about to come to a head with the Flamingo's grand opening.
The Flamingo's opening night, it was something else, a carefully crafted illusion of success and glamour, Hollywood celebrities, champagne flowing everywhere, that air of, excitement and anticipation. Bugsy was the perfect host, basking in all the attention and seemingly unfazed by all the problems that were brewing behind the scenes.
Oh yeah, I bet it looked like something straight out of a Hollywood movie. But, if we peel back the layers a bit, we start to see those cracks forming. The casino wasn't actually making money, and Bugsy's lavish spending had caught up with him, and, the mob, they weren't exactly known for their patience.
No, not at all. This is where that carefully constructed facade starts to crumble. Despite the initial buzz and all the high rollers coming in, the casino's bleeding money, his extravagance, his insistence on, only the finest materials and the most lavish amenities, it all came at a steep price. And the mob, they invested heavily in the Flamingo, and they weren't seeing a return on their investment.
And there's that crazy story about the gambler who wins over $500,000 on opening night. Talk of bad luck.
Yeah, that was seen as a terrible omen. The mob was superstitious, and they saw it as a sign that the Flamingo was cursed. And for Bugsy, it was a sign of things to come. His desperation, it really starts to show. He's scrambling, trying to salvage the situation, selling stock, even pleading with the FBI to help him recover bad checks from gamblers.
Wait, he's asking the FBI for help. That's pretty ironic considering, his line of work. It really shows just how desperate he was getting.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He was trapped in this web of his own making, caught between his aspirations for legitimacy and the brutal reality of the criminal underworld that he was still a part of. And as the pressure mounted, he even tries to make things right with the community through some philanthropic efforts.
Right. He donated to the Damon Runyon Cancer Fund, and he even hosted a benefit concert at the Flamingo. It's hard to reconcile those actions with, his reputation as this ruthless mobster. Was it a real change of heart, or was it just a calculated move to kind of clean up his image?
It's a question that still fascinates people today, historians, biographers. Was he really seeking redemption, trying to distance himself from his past? Or was this a last-ditch effort to save his reputation and appease his mob backers who were getting more and more frustrated? We may never know for sure, but it adds another layer of complexity to his character.
It's fascinating how Bugsy's story really seems to capture that struggle between ambition and consequence, that constant push and pull between light and shadow.
It really does.
Yeah.
And that duality becomes even more apparent when we look at the origins of the Flamingo project. What's interesting is that Bugsy wasn't the only one with a vision for Las Vegas. There was another guy, Billy Wilkerson, a Hollywood entrepreneur. He was known for his nightclubs and restaurants on the Sunset Strip. He actually had the initial idea for the Flamingo.
So Bugsy just swooped in and stole his idea.
Not exactly Wilkerson, despite being a savvy businessman. He was also a compulsive gambler, and he got into some serious financial trouble. He couldn't keep up with the costs of building the Flamingo, so he was forced to look for partners. And that's where Bugsy and the mob come in. They saw a chance to invest their money and use the Flamingo as a front for their criminal activities.
So it wasn't just about the money, it was about legitimacy. They wanted to be seen as legitimate businessmen, not just gangsters. And Las Vegas at that time, it was ripe for the taking.
Exactly. And Bugsy, with his Hollywood connections and his image as this sophisticated entrepreneur, he was the perfect front man. He could move between the world of gangsters and the world of celebrities, seamlessly blurring the lines between crime and respectability.
It sounds like Wilkerson was kind of a cautionary tale for Bugsy. They both shared this dream of creating something amazing in Las Vegas, but Wilkerson's gambling addiction ultimately led to his downfall.
It is an interesting parallel. Both driven by ambition, but their flaws, their inability to control their impulses, contributed to their undoing. And in Bugsy's case, those flaws were magnified by the dangerous world he was living in.
Okay, so let's dive into the Flamingo's construction. I know from the research that it wasn't all smooth sailing. Bugsy's perfectionism, the lavish spending, the post-war shortages, it sounds like a recipe for disaster.
The construction of the Flamingo was chaotic, to say the least. Delays, cost overruns, constant clashes between Bugsy's extravagant vision and, the realities of the time. He insisted on the best of everything imported, marble, custom-made furniture. He even wanted private plumbing systems for every single bathroom in the hotel.
Wow, the expense reports we saw, the insane cost overruns the constant redesigns. Talk about champagne taste on a beer budget.
He was fixated on creating this image of opulence, unparalleled luxury. He wanted to build a place where people could completely escape the ordinary and just lose themselves in a world of fantasy and indulgence. But in doing so, he kind of lost sight of the practicalities, the financial realities of making such a grandiose vision a reality.
And then to make things even worse, the Civilian Production Administration, they were focused on providing housing for returning veterans. They tried to shut down the project, claiming it was violating building restrictions.
Yeah, the CPA saw the Flamingo as frivolous and unnecessary, a waste of resources during a time when the country was rebuilding. But Bugsy, he wasn't one to back down from a challenge. He used his connections, his influence. He even got Senator Pat McCarran on his side to fight back.
So he was able to leverage his political connections and his mob influence to overcome these obstacles. He really was willing to do whatever it took to make his vision a reality.
He understood power, and he knew how to wield it. He could be charming and persuasive one minute, and then ruthlessly intimidating the next. And in this case, his determination paid off. The CPA eventually backed down, and construction continued.
So despite all these setbacks, Bugsy manages to get the Flamingo open. It's this huge, star-studded event, a dazzling spectacle that for a moment hides all the turmoil that was going on behind the scenes.
The opening night, it was truly a triumph of illusion. Hollywood celebrities everywhere, champagne flowing freely. Bugsy's in the spotlight, seemingly unfazed by the mounting financial problems and the growing discontent among his mob investors. But beneath the surface, the seeds of his downfall were already sown. It's kind of like we've got this incredible backdrop, You got the Flamingo, it's open, but it's just hemorrhaging money. Bugsy's dream, this grand vision he had, it's turning into a financial nightmare. And the mob, well, they're not known for their patience.
No, they are definitely not.
So Bugsy, he kind of finds himself in this tightening spiral. The more money he throws at the Flamingo, trying to save it, the deeper in debt he gets, and the more he alienates those mob investors.
And from the sources we looked at, it really seems like he tried everything to keep the Flamingo afloat.
He did. He tried desperately to sell stock. He's pleading with the FBI to recover bad checks. He even turns to philanthropy, almost like he's trying to buy some goodwill.
It's so strange to imagine a mobster like Bugsy Siegel turning to charity.
It is. It makes you wonder, was it genuine? Or was it just some calculated PR move?
Maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah. It's hard to say. It's one of those questions that keeps people guessing. Some think it was a real attempt at redemption. Others see it as just a desperate attempt to save face.
Well, whatever his reasons were, time was running out for Bugsy.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so let's talk about that night in Beverly Hills. June 20th, 1947. Bugsy's at Virginia Hills Mansion. Seems like he's relaxing. Reading the newspaper with his friend Alan Smiley.
I know that. Everything changes.
An unknown assailant fires 9 shots through the living room window.
4 of them hit Bugsy, killing him instantly.
It's a pretty chilling end to a life that was filled with ambition and a lot of violence.
The irony is, Bugsy survived all those gangland wars, all those violent encounters, only to be killed on what seemed like a peaceful evening.
And of course, the case remains unsolved.
To this day, the murder of Bugsy Siegel is one of those enduring mysteries. Just adds another layer to his legend.
So what happens to the Flamingo after Bugsy's death? Does it just fade away?
No, actually. It's taken over by some of Bugsy's associates. Mo Sedway, Gus Greenbaum, and Morris Rosen. They streamline operations, cut costs. And within a year, The Flamingo's actually profitable.
So Bugsy's dream is finally realized.
Yeah, but he's not there to see it.
It's a pretty tragic ending.
Definitely. He put everything into the Flamingo.
Yeah.
But in the end, he paid the ultimate price.
Bugsy Siegel's story it's a story of ambition, innovation, violence, and tragedy.
He was a visionary. There's no doubt about that. He helped turn Las Vegas into what it is today. But his legacy is always going to be tied to the darker side of the American dream.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We talked about Bugsy's early life, his rise to power, his move to Hollywood, his relationship with Virginia Hill, and of course his grand vision for the Flamingo.
We saw how his determination, his charisma, even his ruthlessness took him to the top. But they also contributed to his downfall.
Bugsy's life, it's a whirlwind of contradictions.
And I think it says a lot about human nature and that allure of the American dream.
And the dangers that come with it. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we wanted to leave you with this. Was it all worth it? Was the Flamingo and the transformation of Las Vegas worth all the violence, the betrayal, and the ultimate sacrifice of Bugsy Siegel's life?
That's for each of you to decide. It's about weighing ambition against the consequences and understanding that the pursuit of dreams, especially in a world like Bugsy's, can sometimes lead to unforeseen and tragic outcomes.